Transistors are the fundamental part of all computers and any other electronic devices. Invented by William Shockley, Walter Brattain, and John Bardeen, and created after World War II. It is the frontier for our digital age, as the transistors help humans communicate, work, and produce better. It created the computer, a fundamental part of our modern lives. As it was made 80 years ago, it is still being refined and miniaturized to this day. It is the greatest invention of the 20th century. This documentary will go over the reasons why it was invented, the actual invention, its short and long-term history impacts, and the conclusion. When the telegraph was first invented by Samuel F.B. Morse, there was the issue of signal degradation on the wire with greater distance. The relay was invented to address this problem. A relay amplifies the electrical signal along the telegraph line. However, when wireless telegraphy, or the radio as is commonly known, was invented, the issue was weak signal strength over all distances, as large amounts of power were required to transmit the signals, as the receiver did not have any relay or amplification technology built in. The solution to this problem was the audion. The audion, which was invented by Lee DeForest, was originally meant to be a radio receiver. It used a vacuum tube in which there would be 3 electrodes, a filament, a grid, and a plate. Once subjected to radio waves, a circuit would be closed and opened, creating the dots and dashes that is Morse code. However, its greatest potential was yet to be realized. The audion would be able to produce gain, or amplify signals. Well, how does it work? When the filament is heated, it produces negatively charged electrons. These electrons would be able to move freely through the vacuum of the tube. They are then attracted to the positively charged plate. However, the grid in the middle would use the low power signal input to allow and repulse the flow of electrons, therefore amplifying the signal. The audion, or the vacuum tube as it's known, helped improve radios. It also was used in phone lines to improve the range of the calls. The vacuum tube made it possible for radios to transmit and receive full sound. The vacuum tube was also used in early computers, such as the ENIAC. However, the vacuum tube had its limitations. It was power hungry, heated to high temperatures, clunky, and needed to be replaced often. The hunt was on to find a replacement. At Bell Labs, a team was created to find a solid-state replacement for the vacuum tube. The team included Walter Brattain, John Bardeen, and William Shockley. They were experimenting with semiconductors, specifically germanium, and how it could be used as an amplifier and switch. Walter Brattain and John Bardeen would go on to create the point contact transistor, but the junction and field effect transistors invented by William Shockley would be mainly used in our modern world. However, we must ask, what is a semiconductor? Semiconductors are materials that can conduct electricity, but not as well as a conductor, such as a metal, but can conduct electricity better than an insulator, such as rubber. Well, how does a transistor work? Most transistors are built with silicon, a crystal that can be found in the sand as silica. Silicon has 4 electrons in its outer shell, therefore it can bond to 4 other silicon atoms, creating a crystal or lattice structure. Sometimes one of the electrons in the lattice can break free and move around, creating mobile charges, which makes silicon a semiconductor. To create the transistor, silicon would be doped or injected with electrons in its crystal structure to create 2 types of silicon: a p-type, which had boron in it, and an n-type, which had phosphorus in it. If phosphorus is put in the lattice, there's an extra electron, due to phosphorus having another electron in its outer shell. This electron is free to move around, which creates more mobile charges, making the silicon more conductive. This is called an n-type, as the negative electrons can move through it, while p-types are doped with boron, an element with only 3 electrons in its outer shell. This creates a positive hole that can swap places with the other electrons. This hole attracts the negative electrons. It is called a p-type, as positive holes can move around in it. Commonly, transistors are arranged in an NPN arrangement, with two electrical contacts at each end, called the source and the drain. There's also a third contact in the middle called the gate, which is insulated from the actual transistor with a metal oxide layer. When the transistor is first constructed, the mobile charges in the N-type move to fill the holes in the P-type, creating a depletion layer, where there are no more mobile charges. Since the depletion layer has become negatively charged, it repels other electrons from completing the circuit. However, when a small positive electrical current is applied to the gate, the electrons overcome the repulsion from the depletion zone and travel to the drain, creating an electrical current. The transistor can also act as a digital switch, requiring no moving parts, with 0 being off, or when a current can't complete the circuit, and 1 being on, when a current can flow through. The transistor was demonstrated to colleagues at Bell Labs on December 23, 1947. That day is considered the birth of the transistor. When the transistor was announced on June 30, 1948, at Bell Labs' Old Manhattan headquarters, the transistor was widely dismissed as a solution for a problem that was not there. Most newspapers either did not cover the announcement or had a short article about it. However, ordinary people saw the transistor as an invention that could change all electronics.
Because they are so tiny, transistors have made it possible to miniaturize many types of electronic equipment. This equipment requires less space and will cost less to maintain. Transistors may also be used in multi-channel telephony, which increases the number of calls that can be carried at the same time along telephone lines.
So did William Shockley. He saw potential in the transistor, and soon 2 other engineers saw potential in the transistor too. Masaru Ibuka and Akio Morita were the names of the engineers. When they heard Bell Labs was selling licenses for the transistor, they realized that they could transistorize the radio, which until that point had been using vacuum tubes. So, they created a company that could reliably mass-produce transistors. This company would be called Sony. But before they could release their radio, Regency, an American company in partnership with Texas Instruments, created the TR-1, the world's first transistor radio. Despite costing over 3 times the price of a vacuum tube radio, it still made a profit as it could fit in any pocket, unlike most radios of the time. Other American companies jumped on the bandwagon, but most were not able to turn a profit. Therefore, they looked to the military sector, as generals and other top officials would buy the radios for any price. This left the consumer field largely untouched, which let Japanese companies such as Sony sell their products. The transistor radio had benefits compared to the vacuum tube radio. They were smaller, had longer battery life, and did not need to warm up. The transistor replaced vacuum tubes and helped miniaturize most electronic devices. William Shockley had left Bell Labs and moved to the West Coast, where he founded the company Shockley Semiconductors. He hired scientists to work at his company. This included Bob Noyce and Gordon Moore, the future founders of Intel. However, after some time, his company was losing money. 8 members of the company left to found Fairchild Semiconductors. These 8 people were to be known as the Traders 8. Working in conjunction with Texas Instruments, Fairchild Semiconductors found a way to have 4 or more transistors on a single sheet of silicon without wires or solder. This would come to be known as the integrated circuit. This is the forefather of the computer chip. Transistors are the single most produced electronic device on the planet. They drastically improved all electronic devices, especially the computer. Most modern-day computer chips have billions of transistors in them. Computers translate every action they perform into ones and zeros, or binary code. Transistors compute every 1 and 0 in binary code, being the nerves of the computer chip. In conclusion, we can see how the transistor has changed our modern world. It became the fundamental part of all modern technology, most importantly, the computer. The transistor initiated a new frontier in the digital age, which led humans being more efficient, productive, and communicative. It is the greatest invention of the 20th century.